Welcome back to my channel. For those that don't know me, my name is Chiruta Ameiwa. I'm a certified professional coach and licensed massage therapist with a busy practice here in Longmont, Colorado. You know, there's something to be said about transformation and living a life that's really true to who you are. I mean, what is happiness anyway, right? We could get really down in the weeds with a question like that. But I thought today what I would share is something about what I call a natural human. So I realized early on, I was actually quite fortunate to realize early on that there was something very lost in the West. Not all the West, I know I'm generalizing, but a lot of the West and a lot of the Western mind. And I learned this through some profound experiences I had as a Peace Corps volunteer. And I want to share them with you today because it was really what kick-started my entire life, my desire to be of service, my desire to discover my purpose, which is really the bedrock of everything that I do and everything that I teach. So if that is of interest to you, if you want to understand how I got started and how do you get started, well, here's a little bit of my story today. So stay tuned. I came from working class family in upstate New York. My parents were not all that spiritual minded. I went to church. I went to a Christian North Baptist church when I was young. And I remember having some kind of inclination towards spirituality, but I didn't come from very deeply spiritual people. Nobody could really describe these things to me. I remember being extremely sensitive. I saw auras when I was young. And then, like so many people, you know, I ended up developing the habits of my family. So both of my parents were extremely overweight. They were chain smokers. They drank pretty heavily. I believe my mom was an alcoholic. And so that's what I did. In my formative years, I started smoking when I was 15. I started binge drinking when I was a teenager. I went to college and I did all of that. I didn't want to be overweight like my parents, so instead I developed a really hearty eating disorder. It wasn't necessarily binging and purging. I never really enjoyed throwing up, but I would binge and then excessively exercise. So that's what I did. My parents binged, so I binged. It's what I knew. And I think to an extent, we all do what we know. We don't know what we don't know, which is why, people need the healing arts practitioners of the world, because we all have so many blind spots. So I remember graduating from college. I graduated from the University of Delaware in 2002 with a bachelor's in psychology. And I remember just thinking, what the hell do I do? I was reading about all these different cultures and all these different ways of being and mindsets, both pathological and healthy mindsets, but I didn't know how to apply it. And I knew that it wasn't healthy. But you see, all of my friends in college drink and smoke. It was like a rite of passage. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to join the Peace Corps. And I didn't have much formal spirituality. I didn't have much insight or wisdom at the time, but I had a little bit of a wisdom that said, I need to get as far away as possible from my environment, because everybody around me, including my parents and my sister, were drinking and smoking and not living a very purposeful, wise life, right? And so I asked my Peace Corps recruiter, I remember she said, where would you like to go in the world? And all I said was, send me far away. I want to be of service, send me far away. I want to travel, just send me far away. And boy, did I get what I asked for. I was sent to a little island country called the Republic of Kiribati. It's actually spelled Kiribati, but it's pronounced Kiribati. And for any, history buffs out there, the fame of this place called the Beru Islands was the Battle of Tarawa in World War II, where Japanese descended on this island and occupied it for a while. So here it was. It was October of 2002. I went, and let's back up a little bit before I went. I was still smoking, and I decided I was going to quit. And quitting was really hard, and I'll do another video about how I managed to quit smoking, which, if you take my parents' chain smoking in the house, I ended up having like a 21-year addiction to smoking, not just a 5-year addiction. So fast forward, it's October, I'm leaving for these islands. I had to look it up. I mean, I'd never heard of this place before. If you drew a line from Los Angeles to Australia and then the international date line, Kiribati is right at the equator and the international date line. In fact, this is great for your trivia. There's one place in the international date line that's kind of skewed like this, and that is to get this entire country, the Republic of Kiribati, into one day. And this place was the most remote place left in the world today. It was 3,000 miles from the nearest landmass. I was 7,000 miles away from home in New York, where I was stationed on an outer island for the first year called Beru Island. It was 8 miles long, about a 1/4 mile wide. There was no electricity, there was no running water, there was no CDs, there were no creature comforts. I was one of the only people on the island that spoke fluent English, and I certainly didn't know the language when I first got there. And I gotta tell you, I had no idea that I was addicted to everything. You see, I thought I was just addicted to substances, and I thought I had anxiety. I thought there was something wrong with me. But what I learned was that I was addicted to everything. I was addicted to rough and tumble play. I played ice hockey and rugby in college. I was addicted to attention from men, sex with men. I was addicted to movies. Anytime I felt any kind of intensity, I would tune out. I would find some distraction. And I always coined it as being productive, going to work, making money, being with friends, But in the West, especially if you have some kind of decent money in the West, there's always a distraction, always. I never had to face anything that was within me. So fast forward some months, this was by far one of the hardest years of my life. I didn't have anything to distract myself with. I didn't have drugs, alcohol, sex, attention. I didn't even have the English language. I couldn't even speak and convey how lonely I was. All I had was myself and my mind. And in the absence of distraction, in the absence of noise and clutter and activity, I started seeing just how unhealthy I really was, just how anxious I was, how fearful I was. I never had a moment of rest. And the reason I saw this so clearly was, one, there was no distractions, but two, these islanders are some of the most intact people left in the world today. Now, what do I mean by that? This place, for the most part, was left very untouched. There would be, a seaman that worked abroad and would come back with videos. But these people were incredibly innocent. They were deeply connected to each other, to the village, to the land. Some people that I met had never even left that 8-mile island of Beru. They spent their entire world was in those 8 miles. It was mind-blowing. But yet, these were some of the most peaceful people I had ever seen before. There would be people without teeth. Most people never got past the 4th grade. They would have children young. They would get married very young. They sometimes never left the village that they were born and raised in. But what I noticed was that everybody had place and everybody had purpose. It wasn't that they went out and did it. They didn't have to be a somebody. They just were a somebody. They were, by virtue of being born, they had purpose. When you were little, you went to school and you played with the chickens. Maybe you would go collect the eggs. When you were, 10, 11, 12-year-old boy, you would climb the coconut trees and retrieve the coconuts and give them to your mom and your aunts and, maybe your older sister. When you were coming of age as a woman, you would help your mom. You would learn how to cook. You'd learn how to weave. You'd learn how to do something. Everybody had place. When you were older, when you became what they called an unmane or an unaine, when you reached 50, you were considered an old lady or an old man. But this was a rite of passage. This was something to celebrate in this culture, not in our culture where people hit 50 and they think their life is over, right? There would be a special ceremony for these people. These people would, create the etiquette and the laws and deal with any trouble in the village. And the unaine, the old grandmother type of woman, she would be sitting in the houses and she'd be weaving. She'd be watching the little babies. If she couldn't walk, she'd be taken care of. And what I realized was that there was like a pulse to this place. There was a pulse. There was a connection. There was purpose. Everybody was happy and laughing, and they had collectively so little. They, most families had about $2 a day, if that. And there was so much sharing going on. There was so much trust. You see, they grew up in a society in which they needed each other. They all needed each other for their collective survival. They needed each other for their socialization. They needed each other to weather, any storm. And so they used each other and they treated each other as such. What did that look like? Well, I'll give you a few examples. One, anytime I went anywhere, if I was coming or going somewhere, they would say, hey, where are you coming from or where are you going? It wasn't enough for them to just say, hey, hi. They wanted to engage with me. It was considered polite. Where are you coming from? Where are you going? Oh, that's great. That's a beautiful village. There would be a 1 or 2 minute conversation every single time you passed somebody on the street. Now, in reality, there weren't that many people you passed on the street, but still, these people would engage. They'd look you in the eye. They would essentially say, I see you walking past me in my village. Okay, so that's number one, everywhere you went. Now, sometimes as a Westerner, that got annoying. I just want to get from point A to point B. Stop bothering me. Yes, hi, I'm coming from here. I'm going there. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that was number one. Number two, on the weekends, there would be maybe one generator in every village. So they would have like a social night. And you would see nursing babies and 4-year-olds and, 15-year-olds and 25-year-olds and 80-year-olds. And they would all come together and they would share a meal together, a potluck. They called it a botaki, which means party. And they would laugh and dance and sing. They would play games. I mean, think about if each city in America or in Europe got together and just had an evening of party. That's what it was. There was nowhere to go. There was nothing else to do. So guess what? You're going to laugh and break bread with your neighbors. It created a sense of unity. And everybody was laughing. Okay, what else? Oh, this was one of my favorites. They mirrored this level of connection in the very fabric of their language. Let me show you how they did this. So I'm going to grab a pen here. Now in Western cultures, this is my pen. I paid for it. I'm using it. It's in my possession. It's my pen, right? Well, in Kiribati, if I gave somebody else my pen, so I'm going to give my pen to you. So now you're going to use my pen. Now, in the Western language, when I ask for my pen back, you're going to say, here's your pen back, right? Because we all know who paid for this. It's my pen. Well, in Kiribati, I paid for this pen. I'm using this pen. I'm going to borrow it and give it to you. Now, when I want my pen back, because you're using it, I'm going to say in a very polite way, may I have your pen back? And then, the person's going to say, yes, of course, here's your pen back. Now, this could be for anything. If I give you my bicycle and then I need it back, I say, can I have your bicycle? If you've got extra food, can I have your food? Yes. Let's say I'm the fisherman that went out and caught the fish. Well, you've got the fish in your possession. So if that fisherman needs some of that fish back, they're going to say, can I have your fish? Okay, there is something deep in the fabric of this culture that shows that there really is nothing that's mine, right? So it is not a narcissistic society. It's a very generous society, and it's reflected in their very language all the time, without fail. There's no exception. This is the etiquette. When little babies are being raised and learning how to speak, this is the vernacular of how they learn how to speak. Because at some point in time, in some developmental, evolution, they realized that without having this pulse of connection, they were not going to survive. They were not going to thrive because they were an utterly isolated island country. Now, I have to say, in the entire history of this country, the only time that islands ever warred with each other was when the missionaries came and pitted, one religion against the other. But by and large, these islands never warred. They never fought. I'll give you some other aspects of this culture. There's only one prison in the entire country, and that's on the capital island of Tarawa. Now, a lot of times, each individual island will take care of any issues. If there's a marital dispute, if there's domestic violence, if there's child abuse, if there's, even rape or incest. Just as in every society, these things happen. But when it happens, they deal with it internally. There is no mental illness facility. There is no old folks home. Everybody in society is absorbed and treated with dignity and integrity. I am going to give you another small story. I call this story, the sari story. So oftentimes men would wear saris just from their waist. And I remember sitting with a particular family I was visiting, and there was this man, clearly mentally ill, maybe schizophrenia, I'm not sure, but he was just wandering the village naked. This was just what this man did. He would leave his family's area, and he would just kind of wander around naked. And whoever was closest to this naked man would say something called akawa, which loosely translates to poor thing, poor man. And they would just, take whatever sari they had close by, hanging on the line, and they would wrap this man in a sari, and then they would take him back home. Now, the very next day, this man is still mentally ill. There's no, pharmaceutical medications. So what would happen? Again, this man would wander somewhere else, and the same situation, different family, different part of the village, but same situation. Kawa. And they would take their own personal clothing and they would wrap this man and they would bring him back home. And of course, then that family, knowing that they're dealing with this mentally ill family member, they would probably give whoever retrieved their relative some fish or some bread or whatever they had as a thank you. Thank you for returning this man. And then again, very next day, there was no, what the hell is wrong with this man? I can't believe I have to deal with this. They just realized that in a fabric of society, there's all walks. There's the mentally ill, there's the disabled, there's the aggressors, and everything is just handled internally. Now, let's bring this back to me. I was a whopping 21 years old when I went into the Peace Corps. And I was taught through my culture that I had to be somebody, that I was only worthy of love if I went out there and I achieved, I got the right, credentials behind my name, I made sure I had the right, the right boyfriend, and I looked a certain way, and I was pretty enough, and I was skinny enough, and, then I could be happy. Like, once I did this thing, then I could be happy. Once I did that thing, then I could be happy. And then I observed this culture. And at first, like most of us, I judged it. These people seem so backwards to me. They were a little bit dirtier. Their teeth were kind of rotting. Some people, like, a lot of them didn't know how to read. There was no sophistication. And I was taught that sophistication was the most important quality, right? And then I just slowly observed. And in the absence of distraction, you see, that's key. If I had had any ability to distract in the beginning, I just would have, and I would have missed all of this wisdom that I acquired through observation and reflection. So over time, in the absence of distraction, I realized that all these people had problems. There were disabled people, there was that mentally ill person, maybe the fishermen would come back without fish, and all they would have for dinner was rice that night. And so clearly, this society had problems, but everybody was still like happy. And when I would, go to somebody's house for dinner or somebody else's house for tea or a visit, I realized I was the only one that was caught up in anxiety, always thinking about the future or regretting the past or thinking about some kind of mistake in the past. Like, I was the only one, because I really was the only one. And over time, I thought to myself, what do these people have that I don't have? And what it was their ability to be a natural human. There's so much more I want to say, but that sense of I am worthy simply because I am. I am worthy of purpose. I am worthy of place simply because I am. Just because I have an issue like mental illness or a disability, or I don't have much money and I need to borrow your belongings, even though I can't afford any of my own, I still am worthy of your kindness, of your generosity, and you in turn are worthy of mine. Imagine for a minute if our Western society that is so utterly abundant could live even 5% of that. We have so much competition. We have so much, like, this is how you get ahead. This is how you become a millionaire. This is how you really arrive. And I'm here to tell you that as a person gets more clear and more connected with the things that truly matter, your family, your children, your partner, living addiction-free, turning off the phone sometimes, truly being present for whatever client you're working with. That is the kind of momentum that happiness is from. And whatever is not aligned with that begins to fall away. You see, I believe that us human beings were meant for homeostasis, we're meant for connection, and we're meant for a deep sense of belonging, not because we've achieved anything amazing, but because we are. It's our birthright. And so fast forward, I come back to the US. I just gained all of that information, but I had no words for how to articulate it. That took many, many more years. But I was left knowing a few things. I had purpose, I wanted to be of service, and I wanted to be deeply connected in a society that gets a lot of clickbait from being disconnected, right? And I remember that first year was one of the hardest of my life because I just wanted to go back to those little islands. And I heard, the wisdom within myself say, just hang in there, just be connected, just learn how to create community. And I've been doing it little by little ever since, baby step by baby step by baby step, because I don't have a trust fund, because I had a lot of my own healing to do, because for a long time I didn't quite know what I wanted to do or who I was. This was all part of the discovery. But guess what? I stopped judging myself and I stopped judging other people, because in that way we're all doing the best we can. And we've been so indoctrinated in the West to be a somebody. So I'm here to tell you that one of the best ways to use the life you have to create the life you want is to learn how to be a natural human. And that is all I'm going to say about that today. But again, if you want to know more about my story in the Peace Corps or anything else, I'm happy to share another video. Thank you for tuning in. I know this was a long one. I appreciate you staying until the end. If you gained value and you want more, please consider liking and subscribing, and I will see you in the next video. Bye now.